Hello to all and welcome. My name is Lucy Letterhandler. I'm the Artistic Director and Curator here at the Art Gallery of Southwestern Manitoba, where we are currently hosting the exhibition Renewal, featuring 30 Canadian artist members of the Studio Art Quilt Associates, which is touring across this country. We are gathering online today, which is such a privilege, but even as these technologies do the beautiful work of bringing us together, it's important to acknowledge that all of that begins with the resources of our land. It's important that we consider how to live responsibly in the world and on this planet. As the current and temporary host of this exhibition and artist talk, I will specify that I'm a guest on the homeland of the Red River Métis, lands that have been stewarded by the Dakota Oyate, and Cree, and Anishinaabe peoples since time immemorial, and shared by the Anishinaabe and Denisuli. Because we are gathering from across Turtle Island today, I encourage you to think of the Indigenous nations that have occupied the land that you are on. I'm going to invite Sue Sherman up now, as well as our three guest speakers, Helena Scheffer, Susan Selby, and Kit Vincent. And then I will excuse myself until they've concluded their presentations, at which point we will have a question and answer period. Those of you joining online may pose questions to the artist at any time using the comments section below the video, and I'll relay those words to the artist during the discussion following the presentations. So with that, I will welcome Sue.
Hi, Lucy.
Susan. And we've lost Helena, but she will be back soon. And I will recuse myself and start that slideshow.
Thank you, Lucy. So we're here today to talk about the Renewal exhibition that's showing at the Art Gallery of Southern Manitoba. And next slide, please. So just to give you an introduction, in case you're not aware of Studio Art Quilt Associates, we're a nonprofit organization whose mission is to promote the art quilt as a creative visual work that is layered and stitched, or that references this form of stitched layered structure. Our vision is that the art quilt is universally respected as fine art medium. Next. So Renewal is a juried exhibition of art quilts by Canadian members of Studio Art Quilt Associates, or SAQA. And I should mention that there's something like 4,000 members of SAQA worldwide, of which, and I think the number is approximately 400 are members in Canada. So it's quite a big organization. This exhibition is from the three SAQA regions of Canada: Eastern Canada, Western Canada, and Central Canada coming together to create a single Canada-wide exhibition. The theme is renewal, which is rekindling, looking to a new future, finding hope, or resuming an activity perhaps after an interruption, repair or recycle of something worn and used, recovering strength, or renewed cycles of life. Next. Renewal is a SAQA regional exhibition, as I said, and it includes the 3 regions of SAQA Canada. We, as a group, hired 3 jurors for this. We have gallerist David Kay, curator Leona Herzog, and artist-curator Brant Eisner. Next. Renewal will be showing at these 7 venues that are shown. It started out at Homer Watson House. It's been to Kenora, Quilt Canada in Mississauga, to the Bruce County Museum, and now it's here in Brandon, Manitoba. After this, we'll be going to the Red Deer and District Museum and Art Gallery, and then it will finish up at the Mississippi Valley Textile Museum, which is in Almont, Ontario, which is near Ottawa. Next. We have 33 artists in Renewal, and those 33 artists, as I said, the pieces were curated and juried in a blind jury process, and 33 artists were successful in having their work accepted. Of those 33, we have 3 here with us today: Helena Scheffer, Susan Selby, and Kit Vincent. And so what I'd like to do now is have each of the 3 of them talk to you a little bit about their art. So start with Helena Scheffer. Next.
So, hi there. My name is Helena. I was born in Montreal and I have lived here all my life. So, how would I describe myself as an artist? I am a colorist who works with textiles, and I use fabric as my palette. Any kind of fabric is fair game. Commercial fabrics, vintage textiles that I over-dye, paint, and stamp. Thrifted clothing especially I love, scarves, ties, cottons and silks, and synthetics. Everything works for me, and my fabric ends up looking like Swiss cheese with holes cut all over from the pieces that I snip out. And here is an example. See, but this is a blouse that I bought at a thrift store, and there's not that much left of it, but clothing is perfect. So I don't buy a lot of fabric at the quilt store, and in fact, there aren't even any quilt stores left in Montreal. So what inspires me to create? Color itself is my inspiration. I love every color, but of course, some more than others, but definitely not brown. Red is my most favorite color, as you can see behind me here. I can make a different red piece every day and never get bored. So how do I get started on a piece? I start with a preliminary idea of color that I want to use and start pulling fabrics out of my cupboard and out of my bins that are all color-coded. And it's the fabric that tells me where it wants to go. So for instance, this piece here, Kiribati, is my piece in the Renewal show. And my inspiration was the colors of the sunrise, because every day is a new day and an opportunity for renewal. And that was my inspiration. So I start a piece, I go through my fabric cupboard and my bins, and I end up with a huge pile on my table, using many of the fabrics just once. I am very lucky. I have a beautiful studio with windows on 3 sides, and I work flat on a large table with an IKEA kitchen island underneath for storage. And I use a Bernina sewing machine and a handy quilter Sweet 16 for the quilting. So how has my work evolved over the years? I started, as so many people do, by making traditional quilts. But I realized that I don't like following patterns, so I started doing things on my own, in my own way. And I created a series of monochromatic quilts using strips and squares that I sewed together. And then I had an aha moment when I realized that I could layer and collage the fabrics together without sewing them into straight lines and stick them onto a painted canvas to hang on the wall. So at the time I was operating my own art gallery, and I saw there that textile art hanging on the wall, like a painting, was viewed as art rather than craft. And sometime later, a friend gave me a round plywood panel and said, Helena, I bet you could do something with this. And that's when I started working in the round, which is my favorite method right now. Next, please. This is temperature rising, and this is 36 inches square, I believe, around a diameter. And next, this shows you how I work. So there it is, flat on the table, and I assemble all the pieces until they are how I like them. And then I iron them down because there's a fusible underneath. And then I stitch them by machine and by hand, adding texture by hand stitches, and then I stick it onto the plywood base. So about 7 years ago, I was approached to have a solo show at a local gallery. I decided to create a series combining my artwork with my studies to become a yoga teacher, and I called it The Colors of the Chakras. Each of the 7 pieces is a visual representation of each specific chakra. Can you go to the next, please? And its corresponding color. So I'm not going to show you all 7, but this is, I'll show you some of my favorites. So this is Rhapsody in Blue. So each one is the color of the chakra created through carefully selected fabrics. Now the solo show never materialized because of the pandemic, but I submitted the series to the World of Threads, which is an international textile exhibition in Oakville, Ontario. And the whole series was then purchased by the city of Oakville and is now on permanent display for everyone to enjoy. So it was the best possible outcome. Next. So this is the yellow one, Light of a Thousand Suns. Next. Red Sky at Night. Next. Cosmic Blues. And whenever I finish a piece, I think, oh, this is just my favorite. I just love this one the best, until the next one. Next. So now that I'm retired from my working career as a French-English translator, I create art every day. I also keep some time to practice and teach yoga and to volunteer with a greyhound rescue organization. I sew coats of my own design for each dog that arrives from Spain. And so far I've made about 100 coats. What is the best piece of advice I've ever received in terms of art? And that is, every work of art should have at least one tiny speck of red. And if you look at my work going back and forth, you'll see that they all have a little tiny bit of red for a little life. So this piece is a rainforest, and it was recently purchased by the city of Point Claire for its permanent collection, and it now hangs in the mayor's office. Thanks to SACWA, many of my pieces have been juried into international exhibitions, have traveled the world, and have been published in books, magazines, and exhibition catalogs. Sometimes life inspires my work, and other times my work is inspired by current events. Next. So this is Coral Reef that I did maybe 5 years ago. Next. And this is Coral Reef Elegy, which is my latest one, well, almost latest one. And it's a lament that the colors of the world's reefs are being bleached. They are whitening, which is a tragedy that affects us all. So this piece was just juried into the World of Threads 2026. That's coming up in September in Oakville. Next. These are details of Coral Reef Elegy, just to show you a bit of the stitching that's involved. So I lay it down in front of on my quilting machine, and I just go. whatever inspires me, that's what comes out. Next. So this is what I'm currently working on, inspired by this beautiful Mother's Day bouquet that I received from my daughters. And next you'll see it in process. So there it is, just starting. And that's it. Thank you very much. Next.
Kit is up next.
Sue, I think that you are, there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. So our next presenter will be Kit Vincent from Ottawa.
Hello, I'm here. So I'm going to speak about the piece that is.
Cannot hear Kit.
You cannot hear me?
Oh, I can hear.
Okay. Everything.
I can hear you, Kit.
Okay.
All right. Should I continue?
Lucy, can you hear?
Yep, everything's good.
Yeah.
Okay. So what
Okay, I'm not hearing her.
What you see on the screen is tricolor white, and it's roughly 6 feet by 6 feet. It's a large piece.
Oh, no.
So some of us cannot hear me. Maybe I'll stop and we can sort out the.
Just go ahead, Kit. We can hear. It was only Susan who couldn't, and she's.
Yeah, so I think Susan and Helena are going to leave and come back in, and we'll just let them do that in the background. Please go ahead.
Okay. So this piece was one of 3 large monochromatic quilts I made a few years ago. It's an older quilt of mine. And Lucy, if I could have the next slide, please. I'll start with practical truth. At the time, I had a show coming up, and I needed 3 large quilts quickly. And I had very little time for hesitation or dawdling. I needed a structure that would let me work decisively across 3 large pieces in a sort of a continual way. And as can happen with inspiration, circumstances intervened. The week I began cutting fabric for this was the week of the Bataclan attacks in the city of Paris. And that was a series of coordinated terrorist attacks in the Paris suburb of Saint-Denis. It left 150 people dead. Next slide, please. The airwaves at the time were flooded with French flags, of course, a sign of global grief and solidarity, all collapsing into the same image. Red, white, and blue were everywhere. And as I was posting the French flag across my own Facebook cover photo, I suddenly had a theme. I thought, those 3 colors, why not? I'm usually pretty promiscuous with color, wanting every hue, tone, and shade on the table, like Helena. Even brown is okay with me. So restricting myself to a single dominant color for each piece felt pretty radical. I wasn't going for symbolism. It was strictly operational, but color limitation has a way of sharpening one's attention. A word, though, about the French flag. Historically, the French tricolor is a loaded object. Originally, the blue and the red represented the city of Paris and the people. The white represented the monarchy, the Bourbon kings. And over time, and of course, following the revolution, those meanings softened into abstractions. Red now represented passion and sacrifice, and blue represented reflection and reason. And white was posited in between them as a kind of mediator, sitting between red's passion and blue's reason. That placement matters. White is not neutral. It absorbs, it reflects, it exposes. It's the space where conflict becomes visible. I really like that. So back to my quilt. Next slide, please, Lucy. In tricolor white, white, of course, is anything but pure. It's made from hand-dyed cottons, every color in the rainbow, but at a value of 8 or higher on a scale of 10. Creams, grays, faint blues, yellows, a whole series of what I like to call almost whites. They're very hard to find commercially, and they usually end up being part of my fabric dyeing process. So if I have a vat of dyed fabric sort of lingering, sitting there, the fabric has absorbed most of the dye. The dye has bonded to the existing fabric. I will throw in at the last minute an extra yard or two of prepared for dyeing white fabric, and that fabric will come out as an almost white. It absorbs the last bits of unbonded dye. So to help it along, I placed a black batting under the white ground to allow the lighter strips to pop forward. So those of you that get to see the show in person, you'll probably get to observe this. What emerged was a surface under a quiet pressure, which is what I wanted. Order trying to stay intact, and motion through the direction of the strips, pushing against it. That tension is this work. Next slide, please. So making and meaning. I often begin a piece without a clear verbal framework. It doesn't mean, though, that the work is unconscious. It means the thinking happens while working and through the material itself. Only later, living with the piece, do I recognize what the piece is insisting on. And that happened in this case as well. Balance in this case, not so much as harmony, but as a continual adjustment. Sort of like, when you're standing on one foot, that continual, always slightly tipping. Recovery, not as resolution, but as maintenance. White here isn't peace. It represents vigilance. Next slide, please. So there's a Canadian connection. This understanding brought me back to Joyce Wayland. When I was working for the government, way before I began quilting, I worked in a building that had a quilt hanging in its lobby on loan from the Canada Art Bank. It was huge and hung behind a large glass panel. Each letter of this quilt is a separate quilt sewn to the background. And sometimes when the elevator didn't come quite fast enough for me, I'd meander over and take a closer look at this beauty. In Reason Over Passion, Joyce Wayland chose quilting, a domestic, soft, feminized form, to speak directly to issues of political identity and national myth. That textile lineage is important to me. Textiles are often asked to be comforting. I'm more interested in what happens when they carry a message of discomfort quietly, when softness holds this contradiction. So back to Renewal. Next slide, please. When I was invited to show a piece for this Renewal show, this piece felt like the right one, not because it's cheerful, but because it's about balance, that steady moment after the storm when you just start to find your footing again. In the French flag, white connects the red and the blue. In this quilt, it connects emotion and thought. Renewal for me lives in that in-between space, the quiet work of stitching things back together. Thank you.
Thanks, Kit. So our last speaker of our artist is Susan Selby.
Hello, my name is Susan Selby. I'm a fiber artist who lives just outside of Winnipeg, Manitoba. As a member of the committee, when our renewal thing was introduced, I'd like to speak about how my piece and 3 other pieces relate to our theme of renewal. One of the ways I interpreted renewal was coming out of our darkest days and finding hope when we come out into the light again. Winter solstice represents the shortest day of our year. Every year I count the weeks and days from about mid-November, when the darkness starts to close in on us, until February, when the returning hours of daylight make an appreciable difference. And I always mark the winter solstice as the turning point. A gray, cloudy day just adds to the oppressively dark feeling of the season. Next, please. Oh, not that one. Keep going. No, I think we're going backwards. There. I take many landscape photos and use them for inspiration, but my landscape quilts seldom are a literal interpretation of a photo, more of an amalgamation and interpretation of various scenes. Here's one photo which was part of the inspiration for winter solstice. You can see the rows of stubble in the field through a layer of snow on the ground. This was a nice sunny day, however, so it's only part of the inspiration. Next, back to Joan Kilpatrick. Yes. Joan Kilpatrick's piece, Celebrate, also reflects coming out of dark days as Joan returns to health after going through cancer treatments. The dark colors give way to cheerful yellow shapes as the pieces of her life are renewed. Next. Toni Major has titled her piece, Leaving the Dark, and it marks her journey through loss and grief to once again finding joy in her life. The dark colors gradually lighten and merge into sunny yellows and reds. I love her use of the hand-dyed fabrics, the way the blues and the greens and the yellows and the reds all merge into each other. And the next, please. Judith Martin has used another aspect of renewal, recycling and reuse of something worn and used. In this case, it is an antique quilt. She's used this quilt as a base, layering it, patching it, and adding a very great deal of hand stitching to make something entirely new. Poet in Love hangs from the ceiling and has a large three-dimensional presence, which contributes to its emotional impact. I always want to curl myself inside it and feel its softness and warmth whenever I see it. For winter solstice, next please. Yes, my winter solstice, and then I began with a hand-quilted Dresden plate quilt that had been given to my family many decades ago. We called it Dorothy's quilt. It was well worn, much loved, and faded, with very lumpy batting after many washings. I cut a section of it, layered it with a flimsy muslin and a cheesecloth sky, both of which I had dyed for previous pieces. Next, please. I placed a line of trees at the horizon and added machine and hand stitching to put it together. In this shot, you can, along the bottom, you can see the border of that Dresden plate quilt showing through with some pink dots, some yellow, some blues. And towards the top on the right, you can see Dresden plate shape through the distant field. I often add acrylic paint, Inktense colors, oil paint sticks, even markers to give detail and depth to the landscape, as I did here. There's a little bit of gray paint rubbed over that distant field to give it depth and look like soil that is blown over the field. Next, please. And here again, you can see some of the shape of the Dresden plate quilting that has come through with diagonal lines around a circle. And next, please. And the line of color in the gray sky above the trees is with oil paint sticks rubbed in. And next, is there another one? Yeah, here's, you can really see the shape of the Dresden plate up in the sky. I hope many people are able to review the Renewal exhibit in person, where the many textures, colors, and feelings are best experienced. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for that. So I will remind everybody who's joining us online that you can engage with us over the comments. If you don't mind, I'll get the ball rolling with a question from Marie on YouTube, asking if Helena always works circular, and if so, why?
Lately, I have been working mostly circular, but I have in the past done lots of squares. I did one that, in fact, that was 96 by 75. But that was not on a canvas, that was a quilt. But I find that as I go forward, I just really prefer working around. It just speaks to me.
Thank you. And as we wait for other questions, I had a question for Susan that popped into my head. Well, I don't know if it's even a question because you just finished, but you said that the Dresden quilt had a nickname in your family.
Dorothy's quilt, because it was given to my family by a woman whose name was Dorothy.
Yeah, and thinking about how that speaks to the mission of Studio Art Quilt Associates, that that kind of utilitarian material object being elevated, through legacy, through that kind of family connection, is something that's really at the core of, I think, the current turn in contemporary art in general. So the idea of reuse and resilience, and there's a specific word that quilters always use, but reusing old materials, right? Like really avoiding waste. All of that comes from this kind of homesteading mindset. And I wondered if any of you were thinking about those things as you were building as well. Open question.
Yeah. Well, there were so many memories in that old quilt. I couldn't bear to give it away or throw it out. So I kept it on a shelf for years and then finally cut it up and used pieces of it.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I have a couple of really, really old quilts. You're giving me ideas now. I wanted to ask a question of Kit. Just looking at the pieces that you have, that you showed us today, there's a lot of layers of fabric in those quilts. Are they really heavy?
Actually, no. I mean, compared to Elena's work, my quilts are like butterflies.
Well, yeah, with all that wood as well, I guess.
Yeah. In fact, I had a question for well, I'll answer yours before I ask Helena a question about. No, they're not verbally. Round layer, and the stone. Yeah, sometimes 2 or 3 layers of stone on the ground, but not in. I find them excessively. They're sort of.
I hate to say, but you were cutting in and out a little bit. So if we can just summarize what you were saying, you say it's a maximum of kind of 4 layers of fabric.
Yeah, so like the standard 3 layers, and on top of the standard 3 layers, the top layer of which would be round for me. I have several 2 to 3 layers of strips, narrow strips that are sewn down through the center onto this ground. But the quilts are not terribly heavy. They're no worse than any of the old quilts that I used to sew in the modern quilt style, sort of where there's lots and lots of thread, which can really add to the weight of a quilt.
Thread by thread. Yeah.
And I have a question for all three of you, if I may. In traditional quilting, a great deal of attention is paid to getting the stitching perfectly straight and then tying and burying ends and not having any loose threads hanging off. I'd just like to know what are your thoughts on the importance of these things that we generally refer to as the quilt police. Do they have any place in art quilts?
I can be happy to answer. I think it depends on what it is that you want to say. It's the aesthetic. So if what you want to say is important from a craft perspective, so proficiency, that is really an important part of your overall message. Definitely, it's valid. If, on the other hand, what you have to say is different, you want those things to move. You want them to have full noise. Then it's pretty important. Leave them where they can be seen.
That's a good answer.
Very good.
Either of the other two have anything to add to that?
That kind of precision is why I switched from traditional quilts to art quilts. Let go of the precision.
I've done some completely different from my colorful work. I've done work in black and white. And when I do thread sketches with just black thread on white damask. And sometimes I bury the ends and sometimes I let the threads just flow and they just blow in the wind.
They become part of the artwork then.
Exactly. So that's the kind of the yin and the yang. I have color, and I have black and white.
Excellent.
Another question from the audience, which is if you jettison many things, if you start projects and decide against them, or you mentioned shelves of things that you're looking at that are tempting you to use them to get back to work.
What was the question?
The question, do you jettison many things? Do you start and decide against it?
Oh,
no.
Never.
Once you start, you get going.
Well, no, I shouldn't say that. I have a lot of pieces that I'm in the process of making. At some point, I find that it's not working. I will put those pieces aside, and sometimes I'll come back to them, and they will be resolved. And if I can't resolve them, I will make something else with them. But I never jettison or throw out.
Yeah.
I haven't made the occasional dog bed, but most part they are repurposed into something new, usually a new shape.
Yeah. If you collect fabric, it's very hard to throw any of it out.
Yeah.
And sometimes, if I might add, sitting on a project for a year or 2 or 5, it gives you a different perspective when you take it out of the cupboard. I rarely do that as well, but occasionally I've got a piece that is so terrible I can't bear to work on it. But there are parts of it that I really like, so I don't want to toss it. And if you leave it long enough, then if you have friends who can serve as a sounding board to discuss it, then you can sometimes come up with a solution that's even better than the original thing you were planning.
It sounds like what you're saying is that if the project isn't working, then it just becomes material again.
Not always as extreme as that, but yeah, that can be it too. I don't work with material the way these ladies do, so I should probably keep out of this discussion.
Oh no, what do you mean?
Well, I paint with thickened dyes.
Mhm.
So all of my work is whole cloth, and the only fabric I use is white. So Kit does too. You start from white fabric, but you collect it all up and use the fabric that you've made across various projects. My entire work is on one piece of fabric.
I admire people that go to thrift stores and can make art from reused fabric. I try to do that. I end up with a huge collection of old clothes, and then people are pile doing in the corner. I just can't do anything with it. I've got to use yardage. That's how I work.
We do have the exhibition that's accompanying Renewal in the main gallery right now is by Melanie Rocan, called Mending, and she created an 11-meter long quilt out of entirely thrifted garments. And with the privilege of being a curator, I've been able to handle everything that's in the gallery right now. And I'll tell you that those thrifted materials, when you don't have the control that you're talking about, Kit, the technical side just doesn't exist, right? This had to be almost entirely a conceptual quilt, because, you know, synthetics are going to behave differently than cottons, and corduroys are going to behave differently than, you know, tinsels. And yeah.
Well, it takes a great deal of craft to be able to manage that.
Yeah.
I admire that.
Can I ask Susan a question? I have only seen 2 or 3 of your pieces, and I have to say that the pieces I've seen of yours always evoke Manitoba for me. Is that deliberate, or is that just by chance that I've seen those 2 or 3 quilts?
No, it's not deliberate. I know a lot of people create art quilts from their travels, and I've taken pictures and looked at them, but it never. It's the scenery I live in that seems to come out. Yeah.
And so it's your backyard that you're.
The landscape photo is, yes, my backyard. It was taken.
Well, it's a nice backyard, I have to say.
It is dandelions right now. Incredible.
Yeah. Well, dandelions are good for pollinators and insects.
It's more than they can handle.
Oh.
But yes, it does seem like my local scenery is what I end up being inspired by.
Well, it's nice. I'd have to drive a long way to be able to get a view that doesn't have a building or a road in it.
Speaking of that kind of natural surrounding, I wanted to ask Kit about natural dyes. And Susan also mentioned some in the overview of other pieces in the show. So where are you sourcing your dyes from? Were you a quilter before you were a dyer, or did they develop at the same time? Several questions.
I got my starts late in quilting. I did not have a grandmother that quilted, nor a mother that sewed. But I went down to the States and used up all my annual leave, spent really good money taking really expensive classes from Zero and Carol Sutherland. I learned how to dye from Carol Sutherland. I also went down to San Antonio, Texas, and studied with Jane Dunwald, wonderful teacher, who taught me about everything I know about surface design. The dyes I use are not natural dyes; they're MX, cold water reactive dyes.
Cold water reactive dyes?
Yeah, I use those too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. If you're working with color, you can't buy it.
Exactly.
You have to make it yourself.
Okay.
Yeah. Natural dyes are very nice for some things, but when you want certain strong colors, natural dyes will not
Yeah.
do it.
And they're just so much work compared to the Procyon dyes.
Well, and I started learning how to use natural dyes because I was concerned about, I do a lot of environmental messaging on my quilts, and I like the idea of being environmentally friendly. But I found that the eco dyes, in the natural dyes, are definitely a lot of work. They use an obscene amount of water, and they also include the use of chemicals. Probably in terms of what eventually goes into the ground is better for the ground than if the Procyon MX dyes were to do that. But they're certainly not free from impact,
Right.
ecological impact. And I can't get those dyes off. Like when I do my Procyon MX dyes, I use a lot of plastic sheets. I wash the sheets, I hang them up to dry, and I use them again. But I can't get the natural dyes off them. They color them, and I can't get it off.
Oh, it stains the plastic. That's interesting.
Yeah, it stains the plastic. I mean, it can be gotten off other plastic surfaces, but you have to use methods that don't work on thin plastic tablecloth kind of fabric or material.
People talk about the dyes, and really it's the mordants that you want to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The chemicals that cause the dye to bond with the fabric. That and the reason I use that is that I use rye. Therefore, the undersides of my strip are visible from the surface. So the color has to go right through the fabric and be seen on both sides. When you buy commercial fabric, that fabric is stained. So you have a stain on the surface, but the underside of the fabric very often is white, or it's a pale stain of what's on the surface, and that doesn't work with rye. So that's another practical reason why I end up.
Yeah. Having said that, though, yeah, there are a lot of good reasons to use natural dye. One of my favorite reasons to use natural dyes is when I want a black that actually looks black and not really dark blue. Some of like the myrobalan and iron is a really good black that I don't think you can get the same kind of black from the Procyon. But
well, you could try that. I don't know with thickened, because you add the sodium alginate to your dyes, but I think mixing a deep navy with strong orange, making a pretty good black.
oh, okay, I'll try that. Sorry, we don't want to get down that rabbit hole too far. But,
No, it feels like insider information.
yeah. Are there any other questions from the audience?
Yes. One viewer wonders if she has two questions. If you use non-fabric things, for example, leather, rug fragments, feathers, as we talk about kind of the collection of materials that you have on your shelves.
No.
Fabric, thread, batting.
I have to say, I know a lot of people in Sakwa who do use those things.
Yeah.
Just these three are not in that group.
Yeah.
But
We do. We saw Poet in Love in Susan's presentation, which is a sculptural piece. And then there's one kind of relief piece that is certainly not a wall hanging in that it's three-dimensional, that you can walk around it, and an actual sculptural piece, which looks kind of like a rag rug. I wish that she was here to talk about it, but a stump with a wire frame that's also stuffed and soft. So yeah, this multimedia, which, sorry, I'm jumping to the second part of the question, which is if you ever shape your rugs into 3D pieces other than wall hangings.
I keep thinking I want to, I just haven't done it yet.
Yeah. I've tried it a few times and I've never been very happy with what I created, but it's also I'm not willing to put the time in to practice it to get to something that I would want. So, no.
Whole different level of planning, I would imagine, too. Yeah.
It's also for artists in our organization where we're really looking to show our art. It becomes a lot more challenging to ship art because you have to sort of make it so it all folds up, and then you have to provide instructions to the curators. And some curators are better than others at unpacking and hanging and then repacking. So it usually costs a lot more to ship.
For sure. Yeah.
So, and actually, if I can talk to the previous question just for 1 second, we also need to be worried about if you use things like feathers, if you're shipping your piece across an international border, there can be customs issues with shipping anything that was once a part of a live animal or a plant.
Mhm.
So feathers are fine for this exhibition because it's going within Canada, but a lot of our artists will do stuff and ship it to the United States for a big international exhibition, which could go around the world. And if you're doing that, then you have to avoid anything that's potentially a problem at customs.
That's a good point. Yeah. That's true for collections as well. A lot of collections really want their work in them that they acquire to be shown, which pretty much means hangable, right? You don't want to have to do it, like in the legislative offices, right? As opposed to in a. But I think that these questions are really pointing to the success of your persuasion that this quilt art is absolutely contemporary art and part of that conversation, right? That there's no limits, right? There's an edge at which everybody's playing.
You're talking versus going 3D?
About going sculptural, about adding different media into there, about incorporating organic, formerly alive things, that the boundary between a multimedia quilt and something like Robert Rauschenberg's Canyon, right, gets very, very blurred.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I've been going with very irregular shapes, which is, I think it's my tippy toe in the direction towards 3D pieces. But I do like portraits with frames that are sort of intricate, irregular shapes that have finished edges. And so they're supposed to look like a framed portrait hanging up on a wall.
Cool.
There's another question in the comments. I can read it if you'd like, Lucy.
Sure, go ahead.
What are some workflows / techniques when things don't go as planned while working with this medium?
A seam ripper. Picking out seams, and I've done a lot of picking out of free motion quilting that wasn't moving the way I wanted it to move.
And sometimes just adding more.
Yeah, that can be good. I recently had an article in the Canadian Quilter magazine about a quilt that I really liked the foreground of this quilt, but I really messed up the background badly. So I cut the entire foreground out all the way around. I finished the edges off with matte medium, like whatchamacallit? Anyway, matte medium is like glue. And then I put it on a different backing, just hand stitched it onto a different backing. And so it was looked like a completely new quilt, but the main part of it, the hardest part to make, was salvaged from the original project.
Great idea.
Yeah. I've sliced off a foreground or sliced off a sky, and sewn it to something different, or cut a strip out that didn't give the right perspective. So yeah.
So add to the seam ripper, the rotary cutter.
Yeah. Well, I always use scissors when I'm doing that kind of cut. I don't trust myself with the rotary cutter when I'm really near stuff that's finished and good.
Rotary cutter is so much more satisfying.
Oh yeah. If you want to slash something off, that's good.
I just got some electric scissors to, when I sew the dog coats, I'm cutting these really thick layers, and my arm was just like, and so my husband found these electric scissors for me, and it's like life-changing.
Oh,
Just
wonderful.
go bzzz.
Those were all the rage in the 70s. We had a pair with a long cord. They probably don't have a cord now.
No cord. They're battery.
They're back. They're
It's
back.
rechargeable. Yeah.
Helena,
Oh, okay.
Helena, I have a question about shipping your large round plywood pieces. Is it like, do you have to crate those?
No, my husband has built boxes for me out of cardboard. Like we used. Actually, I haven't sent any really large ones to the States. Like now, I'm not shipping anything to the States. I'm just kind of no US right now. But I have. He has built me boxes from bicycle boxes. Bicycle shipping boxes.
Okay.
I got from a local bike store for $5 and cut them up to reshape them.
Fantastic. Good to know.
Well, since we're coming up on the hour mark, unless there's any really pressing questions, I will take this opportunity to say thank you so much for your time, and to everybody who joined us as well. It's been a real pleasure. And if you're passing through Brandon, please come see the show. It's up until August 1st, again, accompanied by Melody Brocand Mending. You can't read it surely, but there are 15 different venues across the province of Manitoba that are celebrating fiber arts in the month of June. So if you're doing a road trip or even a visit and then a doodle around our province, then there's a lot of fiber art to see in the next month. So wow. I will say again, thank you so much. It's been a real honor to have your work in the gallery. And all of your colleagues, and to meet you here and to hear about your processes.
Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.